Sorry about that. Let me try that again. My name is
Luigi.
While I don't consider myself a part of the community at large anymore, object shows are still something that mean a lot to me, and not for nothing, nowadays I feel the community is probably the best it's ever been in terms of what's being made. I haven't gotten around to seeing every big modern ongoing object show, but I've gotten myself into a few of the more notable ones, and I'm just amazed at how far the community has come over the years. Today I'm just here to gush about one of, if not my personal favorite from around the time I was the most active in the community, that being Object Overload. Originally started in 2013 by Niall Burns, aka XanyLeaves, lasting about a year with 6 episodes, getting abruptly cancelled and later rebooted with a single episode in 2015, and now 7 years later we're getting another reboot that was just announced a few days ago at the time of my recording. I cannot begin to describe the burst of adrenaline I got from seeing this damn video pop up in my feed. I was late to the party too. This thing was up for 10 hours before I saw it. I honestly thought it was a joke at first and I was ready to be disappointed, but nope, it's legit. Before I go into detail about the reboot specifically, I might as well mention why I have a particular fondness for Object Overload in comparison to what else was being made at the time. Obviously the nostalgia has given me a bit of a rose tint in my eyes, I won't deny that. I can mostly look past the glaring flaws of the original run because I'm just enjoying the ride like it's 2014 again. But I'm not going to sit here and try to explain to you why this is the peak of the OSC because, well, it's not. But I will explain why it struck a chord with me. I have 2 major factors I can pin down for why I enjoy the show as much as I do: simplicity and characters. Let's start with the first. Ironically enough, this is probably one of the show's biggest criticisms back in its day. It's a very by-the-numbers object show, all things considered, especially since around that time a lot more of the prominent and cocky members of the community were striving for more originality and trying to raise standards of said originality to a more strict degree, which, even as a dumb teenager who was almost bullied into following this mindset at the time, I've always thought that was kind of stupid. Every object show is conceptually derivative from the get-go. The only reason that Inanimate Insanity exists is because Adam Katz saw BFDI and said, wow, I can do that, and here we are now. So while it was heavily criticized for being the BFDI knockoff of BFDI knockoffs or what have you, I feel it's actually one of the series' stronger aspects. It knows what it is, and instead of trying to be way more than what it needs to be, it works for what it is. Sure, there were some extra things sprinkled in there, but even with these, they didn't really take too much focus away from the main aspects of the show, and didn't overstay their welcome that much. Well, as far as we know, since there's only been 6 episodes of the first incarnation, so for all we know, it could have gotten a bit worse as time went on, but at least I feel like these were done much better than the stuff that was being done in BFDIA at the time, because at least here they felt much more in line for what the show was trying to be. Now for the characters. I think Object Overload has the most solid cast of a standard competition object show, at least at the time. I feel each one, for the most part, has their own unique identity, and even some of them are based on tropes. I feel they were still well done. The Alliance are a joy to watch whenever they're on screen, their dynamic is really fun. Toaster is basically Rocky from BFDI if he was actually funny. Clock is probably my favorite interpretation of the smart guy who invents things trope in an object show because it doesn't 100% eat up his personality, and I like Boxing Glove's interpretation in Rostrum Rampage as being sort of a bad luck magnet, but reflecting of everyone else's way rather than it always being put on him. A fun spin on the unlucky Jinx trope, especially versus his original portrayal where he was a big softie that everyone assumed was dangerous because he's a boxing glove and boxing gloves hurt people. Yeah, I don't get it. Even though these guys are really enjoyable in their own right, I think what brings it all together is how they interact. There's a bit of it in the original run, but my point fits better in Rostrum Rampage. There's actually a really nice sense of community with the cast, I feel. In a lot of object shows, the characters do know one another, but are obviously segmented into their own groups, and some barely interact. For how big Overload's cast was at the time, the show really gave you the sense that all these guys knew one another and were a tightly knit community to an extent. As much as I enjoy the challenge in the episode, I feel the episode truly shined before Gamey showed up. It really does feel like a bunch of dudes living on an island together and making the best of things and just living their lives. It's honestly kind of comforting, and I think it's the reason why I enjoy rewatching Rostrum Rampage so much. It's just a nice cozy feeling you don't really get from other object shows, both then and now. Despite some of the antics in the show, it just feels chill and I really like that about it. And while this isn't as important, I will say for the record, it's funny as hell too. It did take a bit for the show to really get its footing in this regard, and not every joke lands as well as it should, but there's a few moments in both the original run and Rostrum Rampage that got me laughing decently hard, especially in the latter.
Oh, what is my life?
I feel a lot of it comes from Zany himself, which is why Overload has the feel that it does. He doesn't do too much of his own big stuff in the OSC these days, but the stuff he does do is great. Like, I know he doesn't write for it, but his performances too in Teapot is fantastic, and I don't think anyone else could pull it off as well as he does. Dude's a talent and a half, and I've always admired his work, object or otherwise. Anyways, on to the reboot. This segment might be short because we don't know as much, and I'm primarily just going to speculate a ton of junk. The teaser doesn't really give us much of an idea what to expect out of it being a thing, since it was confirmed the trailer takes place in an alternate universe adjacent to the reboot. But the only glimpse we get is Marvel showing up at the end. The rest can be purely up to interpretation. There are some key things that are mentioned that do get me thinking though. A.
And there are probably realities where we sound completely different, look completely different, and don't even know each other yet. Isn't that cool?
The main takeaway I got from this is that the voice cast is going to be completely reworked. To what extent, I don't know. In the older episodes, Xany pretty much voiced everyone, barring a few exceptions. While I don't have a problem with the original voices, I won't go out and say that all of them are equally good. Xany does a decent job differentiating anyone to an extent, but some of the voices can sound somewhat samey. Like Paper Airplane and Soccer Ball sound really similar, and pretty much every one of the girls sounds nearly identical aside from Crayon. Not to say one or two people voicing every character is exactly a bad thing. Michael and Carrie did the same thing with Season 1 of BFDI, and even then you have Satomi and Pokey doing a lot of the voices in modern BFDI, and while yeah, you could tell, everyone did have their own unique voice and came into their own really nice, which is honestly impressive. We also don't know what the show's gonna look like outside of Marvel's few free seconds on screen, and even then, that gives us no ideas on the background design and such. The show, especially in the original run, really wasn't visually interesting. Episode 1 used standard BFDI grass and stuff, like, come on. So I'd love to see how the reboot creates a better visual identity for the show. B.
There are realities where we don't have to deal with lighter anymore.
Xany already confirmed on Twitter that the cast is getting shrunk down and a bunch of them are getting cut. There's only going to be 21 going in, along with everyone getting a redesign. So, first of all, I think this quote from Globe is a good indicator that Lighter isn't returning, which makes sense since he was kind of just the standard brute slash asshole of the cast, and I feel everyone kind of realized you don't need to stick to that kind of formula to get a good cast down. But that begs the question, who is making it? The only ones that have been confirmed 100% are Marble and Pumpkin. Marble was obviously in the teaser, and Xany confirmed Pumpkin in a tweet. I could easily say that Candy, Globe, and Clock are in because they did show up in the teaser. Well, Clock was off screen, but you get what I mean. But it's been specified by Xany that the teaser doesn't take place in the reboot, hence the old design, so it isn't exactly confirmation. But I'd argue that these three are some of the most iconic and important characters in the show's earlier incarnations anyway, so it'd be a bit weird for them to get cut. We don't even know if every character will be from the original cast. We could easily get newbies. There's already 2 in the concept design sheet, but again, we don't know. C. Clock making an alternate reality portal. This was 100% pure, insubstantial, ridiculous speculation on my part, and if I happen to get this right, I will be shocked. But I'm thinking this might potentially lead to the show's big hook, alternate reality jumping. Well, okay, it wouldn't be the first object show to do this, to be fair, but I'm thinking in a more fun sort of way rather than it being a simple method of travel like in one or Show's Over. What if every episode, the cast would temporarily be transported into a different dimension or planet, and the challenge would be centered around whatever crazy wacky shit is in said dimension? That sounds awesome, and it leads to a lot of creativity versus just being in a grassy island like most other object shows of the era. Not a bad thing, mind you, and even then, I wouldn't mind that because it would kind of just go back to the whole, like, it being sort of a throwback to that kind of era. Again, if I'm somehow right, I'll be flabbergasted beyond belief, but the more likely scenario is that it was just a framing device for the teaser to establish it's a whole new canon and not much else. Clock tends to build random shit that goes nowhere and blows up in his face, so who knows? All this combined makes me really hopeful for the reboot, and I'm just curious more than anything else how Xany and his new team are going to reinvent the show nearly a decade later, especially when he's gone on record multiple times saying he thinks the original one was horrible, which is why I'm surprised we're even at this point. Xany, if you're watching this, sorry for being a giant nerd and potentially being awkward as f***, but I also want to thank you for making this show and bringing it back to life. No matter how long it takes, I'll be waiting here for it to arrive. I genuinely think it has the potential to become one of the big shows of the current era of the community if it keeps going strong. So please, take all the time you guys need.